Okay, this is the left front knuckle that was broken, and this is the replacement one that I got off of eBay. And interesting thing was when I went to originally source this, the best price I could find at an Arctic Cat dealer online was like 175 bucks or over $200. It was, I can't remember exactly which, but it was really up there. And then when I went and looked for used ones online on eBay, I found a lot of them listed, and the majority of the ones that said specifically that they were for the 97 454 Arctic Cat, even used, they wanted $75 or more for them. So, but I started to notice some other ones that were cheaper. So then, just for the heck of it, I came across this one here. It was 25 bucks. This was sold to me by Pinwall Cycles of Ohio. They have an eBay account, and I noticed that it looked very similar. So they listed this as being for a left steering knuckle for an Arctic Cat TRV 500, model year 2006, and the Arctic Cat part number is like I don't know, it's 2199-12-05 or something like that. So anyways, when I looked up the bearing that this knuckle uses and compared it to this bearing on the original knuckle, it was the same part number. So right away I knew this bearing would fit here and this bearing would fit here. So I said, well, okay, so I know that'll fit. And so then the next question was, well, what about the brake caliper? Well, it turns out they use the same brake caliper. So I knew that this spacing here was going to be the same as on this one here. So everything started to look like it was going to match up. So I decided for 25 bucks, heck, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to put it together and see, if everything fits. In fact, the only thing I could really find that parts-wise that was going to be different was the tie rod end that fits in here is a different part number than the tie rod end that fits in here. And so initially I figured that meant that these two holes were going to be a different size. And in fact, when it came in, they're not. So then when I just kind of physically hold things up against each other and look at them, it really started to appear to me that this is going to be a good match. So right now I'm still holding out hope that this is going to match. And if it does, my recommendation would be anybody who's got an old Arctic Cat like I do, you ought to take a good look at some of the newer Arctic Cat used knuckles that are on the internet, and maybe save yourself quite a bit of coin. What else did I do? Oh, check the upper and lower ball joints. Same ball joint part number here as for here, so I knew that these holes here were going to be the same. So, I mean, it really starts to look good. I did notice on the old one, it's got kind of like this wire spring clip that slips in there to retain this bearing. And on the newer one, it uses a more conventional large snap ring, which seems like a better setup. But, this looks like it might work out. Everything I've looked at seems to match up. Just kind of eyeballing it dimensionally, it appears like it's going to be a good match. So just thought I'd mention that because that might be something noteworthy for anybody who might be viewing this video and having a problem with sourcing a decent price used knuckle for their Arctic Cat. Okay, the used left knuckle that was broken that I had gotten a replacement off of eBay for $25 in shipping. Upon closer examination, realized it was not the correct knuckle. The knuckle that I had bid on eBay was for a 2004 Arctic 650, and the knuckle that they had sent me was for a different year 500, and that knuckle is actually quite a bit different. It doesn't have these seals. It doesn't have this outer seal and this inner seal, and the bearing is held in by a large snap ring, kind of like this style snap ring. So I called them up, and to their credit, they quickly rectified the situation by quickly sending me out the item that I had bought. It just accidentally pulled the wrong item off the shelf. But anyways, so this is the knuckle for the 650, 2004 650, which I believe is going to fit on my 1997 454 Bearcat. Of course, I won't know until I try and start to fit all the other parts together, but right now I'm going to remove the old seals and try and remove the old bearing. Alright, pried with a screwdriver, and that seal popped right out. This bearing is packed with grease, and I can see that the clip in there is identical to the clip that's used on the 454, which looks like this. I just got done removing the old bearing from this knuckle, this used knuckle that I bought, and I'm going to get ready to put the new bearing in. And this bearing is held in by a retaining clip, and then it's a press fit, so you have to push it out from the back side. So first you have to remove this inner seal, which basically I pried that out with a large screwdriver, banging on it, and knocked it out. And then I had a heck of a time getting that bearing out of there. It's a really tight press fit. So what I had was, I found that if I knock out the inside race and the ball bearings and the cages that hold the balls and everything out, so that all I had left was the outer piece that was pressed in there, the outer shell, I found that this old plumbing fitting I had fit right in there just right, and then I was able to just pound on this and tap it out and knock it out through the front. And then I cleaned it all up. Getting these front wheel bearings pressed into the knuckles without a shop press can be trying. The way I got this one pushed in this far was I just rigged up a couple of things so I could use my large bench vise. I used this is a steel pipe plumbing fitting that actually fits right inside here. What that lets me do is that lets me mount this side up against one jaw, because the shape of the back of the knuckle doesn't allow it to really mount straight, stay straight. So that way I can make sure when I'm pushing nice and straight. The bearing goes in pretty easily. If you get the bearing slightly cocked in the bore, you're going to have a real hard time. And then the other thing I did is, you don't want to push on this inner race. You want to push just on the outer race, and the easiest way to do that is, I've got this large brass flange nut in my pile of stuff that I have around, and that actually fits over this perfectly and allows me to push, have the other jaw of the vise push up against it and seat that in there. Now, by using the same pipe fitting as a base and setting it on a firm surface and using a drift, in this case it's a chisel with a very dull flat bottom to it, and tapping carefully around the edge, I'm able to fully seat the bearing. Now I'm going to install the snap ring that retains the bearing. The snap ring that retains the front bearings are just this simple wire arrangement that basically just snaps into a groove in there, as opposed to the rear bearings actually use a more conventional retaining ring, an internal retaining ring. This is the front knuckle that from the right side, which wasn't broken, so I'm going to reuse this knuckle, but the bearing was completely disintegrated. You can see the ball bearings and the races just fell right out. Two seals on this, an outboard seal and inboard seal. Big screwdriver, this popped right out. But then getting the rest of this bearing out of here, basically it's held in by a wire clip. It's kind of hard to see, it's got a lot of rust in there. But that clip is in there so tight, I'm going to try and tap this down, see if I can loosen the clip up. So this is what the clip looks like. So now with the clip out, I should be able to drive this out from the back side, out the front. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my same method that I used before, which is using this plumbing fitting, which I found fits right in there, placing it in the jaws of the vise and putting a lot of force on it and clamping it down. Just squeezing in the vise wasn't going to get this one out. This one was really stuck in there. So what I did was I put it on the floor and got my little makeshift fitting in there and pounded on it and was able to break it free. And of course I was only able to get it out to where it's flush with the edge here, because now it hits the floor. So now I just got to rig up a way to keep this upper lip supported and give clearance for the bearing to be pushed out. Actually, I didn't have to rig anything up. Turns out if I just hold it in my hand firmly and hit it with the ball peen hammer, I can actually drive that bearing race right out. And there we go. So I'll clean that up a little bit before I install the new bearing, and we'll go from there. Alright, I'm going to install these seals. These are ArchiCat 0402-089s. These are the seals they're the outer seals for the front steering knuckles. They just press fit in, and then what's supposed to ride on this inner surface of the seal is actually this inner surface on the hub in the front, which this one is in really bad shape. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to take the discs off of these so I can get a better look at them. But I got a feeling that I'm not going to be able to use these hubs, which is disquieting to say the least. Okay, the outer seals are in. Okay, the inner knuckle seals are ArchiCat 402069s. And I ordered those through Hyperparts, and what Hyperparts ended up shipping me was these here, which are part number 609-1349, and it's a seal knuckle inner upper fits Honda, which is interesting, but they are the correct dimensions. So those are the inner ones. Outer already in, so now I'm going to push in the inner ones. And these are also just pressed fit into the backs of the knuckles. Here's how I get the Torx screws out of the hub, the ones that hold the actual disc brake assembly onto the disc brake disc onto the hub. I use this, it's almost like an Allen wrench, but it's got a Torx type head on it. And you need a lot of leverage on there to break these free because they're frozen. So just take a large screwdriver, insert it through the hub, and then put a helper, which is using a copper pipe, on here, and then with one hand holding the screwdriver and the other hand on the pipe, you can get enough leverage to break it free. Okay, I've got these all loosened up so I can take this disc off, and what I noticed is that on this side this disc has little slots right at the point where the screws go through. So it's a little slot cut from the inside edge here into where the hole is that the screw goes through, the mounting screw goes through. And that's different than the other one. The one on the other side doesn't have that slot. So I'm not sure why that is, but I don't know if that was just a production change or what. But maybe this hub, maybe one of these hubs is not original and was changed out at some point, and maybe the hub came with a disc on it, and maybe it's not even from the same exact machine, but it doesn't really matter to me. They're dimensionally they're identical. Okay, this hub It actually seems to be in a lot better shape than the other one. This hub still has the remains of the the old wheel bearing stuck to it, so I've got to get that off, and then I'll be able to get a better look at how that. I mean, it's kind of pitted, but it might clean up. Depending on how this looks, I might be tempted to try and reuse this hub. The splines on this one are rusted, but again, after I clean it up, I'll have a better idea of the overall condition of it. But what I've got to do now is I've got to get this piece of bearing off of there, which I'm going to start by whizzing this if I can on the wire wheel just to get some of this crud off of here. Okay, got this issue with the hubs, front hubs. I took the brake disc off. It's just held on with these Torx screws, and they came out pretty easily. Anyways, with that off, you can really get a better look at the area here with the seal. The outer seal on the knuckle is actually supposed to ride on this area right here, and this one is badly rusted and has a big deep groove worn into it. I mean, it's just toast. So the problem is, if I install this hub, the outer seal is just going to get ripped up by this sharp ridge of metal that's on the edge here, and the seal will be useless, and as soon as water gets in there, you're going to have an issue. So it's going to damage the bearing, front wheel bearing. So I needed to replace these, and I found somebody who had a new old stock one on eBay with the correct part number, so I bought that one, and in the photo it looked identical to this one. And then what the person who at that particular company did was they inadvertently shipped me the wrong one. They shipped me this one, which is a part number 0502421. Obviously brand new, but much newer. Apparently this is supposed to be for like a 2002 to 2004 quad. But then when I looked at it, I realized that although the type of metal is different, and the other difference is on the original one, bolts screw into here to hold the wheel on, so the wheel's bolted on. On this one, the newer style, it actually has lugs, and you slide the wheel over here and put lug nuts on it. So all I need to do is get some lug nuts, and then I could bolt that wheel onto here. The spacing's identical. I already checked that. That was easy enough to do. Just put it on top of the other one, line it up, and it's a perfect fit. Then I took the brake disc off, place that on top. Those holes line up perfect. So this will mount up. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just check the dimensions on this part of the hub and the part of the hub that the seal's on. Try and figure out if it's the same. But it sure looks like it is. And then the other thing I've got to check is whether or not the dimension from here to here, where I'm pinching, is the same on both. And oddly enough, when I run this part number through Arctic Cat's website, they don't show this as a valid cross for my original hub. The reason being is because they consider this to be a very different part, I assume because of the lugs. But that means that if you're willing to change over to lug nuts, that gives you a whole nother possibility of hubs to look for. So now, instead of just having to try and find these new old stock or good used, I can now widen my search parameters to this newer machine and see what I can come up with. So I'll let you know how that turns out. Okay, I used a big micrometer, and basically I measured the OD of this part of the hub that inserts into the bearing on the knuckle, and it's identical on the old one and the new one. I also checked the dimension from this surface here to this surface out front here. It's identical on the two. And as far as I can tell, the dimension of this area here that the seal contacts this OD is the same as this OD, although this one's so ground up it's kind of hard to tell. So I couldn't really get a good measurement, but everything seems to match up. So I see no reason why I can't use this this nice new hub that they sent me to replace this old style. Other than the fact that once again I'm going to have to get some lug nuts, but that's no big deal. Even the little insert here, this little rubber insert, fits right in like it should. So I'll be able to reuse that, because that's in pretty good shape. And that ought to do it. This has this raised ridge area, and all this is here for is to help guide the rim into position. Basically, it will let you kind of hang the rim on that little lip and rotate it so you can get the bolts started easier. They eliminated that on the newer style hub for obvious reasons. You've got the lugs, the studs to actually help align and keep the rim in place while you tighten the lug nuts. So other than that, I think we're going to put this on. Okay, I kept working on this hub, getting that part of the bearing that was stuck on this hub off, and kept working at it with the gear puller, and finally was able to break it free and get it off. And then what I did was I cleaned up the surfaces here, especially that inner surface that the outer seal on the knuckle actually has to ride on. And it's not as nice as I'd like it to be, but it's going to be serviceable for my purposes, because I do not want to, at this point, I don't want to spend the money on a new hub unless I come across something on eBay cheap. And I'd really like to get this unit back together and working, drivable for a while, so at least through the winter. So that's about it. The way that I clean that up, that area in there up, it's really hard to get in there, but what I did was I used my my rotary tool. I have one of these, it's almost like a Dremel type tool with a extension and a little wand and a small fine grit sandpaper wheel on there, and that it allowed me to get right in there and clean that area, so that worked out really well. Alrighty.